It's fun to play with older techniques and expand on them with newer supplies and ideas. And in today's video, I'm doing just that with two faux leather techniques. Hello and welcome to Karen's Creative Cards on YouTube. I am Karen Hashik and I love to create unique backgrounds and also love to use cover dies for backgrounds as I did in my first card example. Isn't this background cool? And it's made even more interesting with the stitched background dies from Cat Scrappiness at the different levels. So I'm going to show you how I made that background, and again I used a Cat Scrappiness cover die that has stitching on it and those triangles, and then raised them up a little bit. And this sentiment is from Lil Inker. So I started out with a piece of heavier weight craft cardstock that is heat embossed with a crackle pattern. I tape it down onto my craft mat because it will warp and when I'm doing these steps, and I don't like that, so I have it taped down. I am going to spritz the piece with some water, and then I am going to sprinkle on some Bister powders. Bister is a water-soluble wood stain powder. It comes in many different colors and it's imported from the Netherlands. It's been around for many years, and to my knowledge it was the first watercolor powder, at least it was the first that I discovered years ago. Well before Colorburst and Nuvo shimmer powders, these were available. Because it is made out of wood, all the colors have some brown in them. Now the store in the United States where I used to buy them is no longer selling them, but I did find another and I've linked to it in the description box. There are also links there for more details on each of the cards shown. So I've spritzed that, and then I poked a hole in the cover, which is how I was taught to do this. And then I'm just going to sprinkle on some of this powder. Now you don't need very much at all. And all the colors for this one are in the brown tones. I have Natural, which is very brown, and then Brown Bister, and then the Mahogany, which is going to add a nice little touch of the red. And then I am going to spritz it with water and watch those pretty colors appear. And then what I like to do is move it around. I can see that I'm going to need some more. And you're just going to play with it until you like the look. I think I have enough of the red. I'm going to take a paper towel, wipe up some of the excess that will go to the sides especially. And you can also decide if you think one area is too dark or you don't like it, you can always just kind of blot up a little bit on those areas. But I think this is going to turn out just great. And like I said, I wipe up the excess along the edge. I would let that dry naturally for a little while, because if I use a heat gun, it's going to move all those colors around and I don't really want that to happen. So I'm going to let it dry naturally, and then I can finish it up with a heat gun. And when it is dry, this is the kind of look that you get. So I just think that faux leather background is a very neat look. But what I also like to do with each one of these techniques is take it a step further and think, well, what would it look like if I use some really different paper? I have this metallic marble adhesive sheets from Sizzix, and you can see it's really bright and colorful and very pretty. But what if I wanted to tone that down a little bit with those wood colors? And then I use this die cut, this cover die from Memory Box, to add the leaves for texture in the background. So that's a very different look, but still using that same technique. So I liked how that one turned out as well. years ago, I learned another faux leather technique, and I'm going to show you how that one is done. So we're going to take a piece of craft cardstock again, and we are going to spritz it with a mix of glycerin and water. And the measurements are 1 part glycerin to 4 parts water. Now, I don't really know why this works. I assume it helps to break down the paper fibers. I just know that I learned this years ago for this technique. And so then you're just going to rub it in. And rub it in again. I just want to give you a quick tip on this. If you get this glycerin, and it's available like in pharmacies or online, and you create some for using it for this technique, after you're done, within a day or two of being done with it, clean this out. I left it sit for like about a week, and it was full of mold. So you don't want to let that sit in your bottle for very long. I think, overnight is perfectly fine. Now we're going to wrinkle this piece of paper up and carefully open it up. And then we're going to do it again. And then I'm going to take Distress ink, in this case it's the Vintage Photo, and I'm going to rub it over those wrinkles. Give a real cool distressed look with that. Now, if I were doing the original technique as I learned it, I would at this point emboss this in an embossing folder while it was wet, but I'm using cover dies instead, so I'm going to skip that. So at this point I need to dry this, so I'm going to turn the camera off and we'll be right back. So once that is thoroughly dry, then I'm going to take the Distress Vintage Photo ink and rub all over it, adding some color to the background. Of course, it's up to you how dark you want it to get. And then I like to add some spiced marmalade, which adds a little bit of lighter leather look. The orange highlights those. And there is a very cool distressed leather look. It almost feels like leather with that technique, and it's fun to do. I die cut a background out of a sheet like that with a D's Distinctively background die for this card, and I think that turned out really cool, and I like that distressed leather look almost. I wondered how this technique would look with different cardstocks, like this wood and marble patterned ones from Park Lane at Joann's. And so I tried it with these cover dies, and in the background it's subtle, but the wood graining is in there, and then that technique on top, I thought that turned out just lovely. And then this one had the marble in the background, and again using a cover die and that technique, I have a gorgeous card. So it's fun to take them and make some slight changes and then see how they look. So I love how all those cards turned out, and I'm going to show you how I made these. My favorite part of the last technique was the crinkling up of the cardstock and adding distressed inks. And I wondered if I could combine the two techniques for a new unique background look, and the answer is yes. So these are the two cards I made, and I'm going to show you how I made one. So I combined the two, used parts of one technique and parts of the other, and this is a very cool background that I cut out with a cover die. And then this is the one that I'm actually going to show you how to make. Now, it's taking it a step further from the faux leather look. I mean, I used some green bisters, but I think it's still very cool. So I have a question for you. What should I call it? I'll show you the whole piece when it's done. And if you can come up with a neat name for what that technique, combining those two, because it no longer looks like faux leather, I would love it if you would share your idea in the comments. And if you live in the United States and I pick your title, title for this technique to use, I will send you this card and a prize. So see what you think as I'm doing it. So once again, we're going to start with this glycerin mix and the embossed crackle background. We're going to rub it in. And we're going to spritz it on the back, rub it in, and then I'm going to wrinkle it and open it up carefully. If I can soak some of this water up. Wrinkle it again. And then I'm going to rub it with the Distress ink and get some of that brown, especially onto the wrinkles and the crackles. Now, at this point, normally I would heat set it, but now it's already wet, so now I'm going to sprinkle it with Bister powders. In this case, I'm using some greens. A green. Now the green still has brown in it. Whoops, you don't open these because I got a hole in the top. So it still has brown tones to it, but it also of course has some green in there. And then I'm going to add some yellow. And I use a little of the brown too. See if we like this look. So as I spray it, the colors appear, and then you can move them around until you like the look. Now, sometimes you get a little too much powder in one area, and I see that up here, so you can just take a paper towel and, move it a little bit, or just, wipe it up a little. It's kind of up to you how much color you want. And you can take some of that wetness and just kind of move it into a different area that maybe doesn't have enough. So just play with it. I just love to play with these ideas, and it's just paper and a little bit of time, right? If you don't like it when it's done, toss it away. But I almost always do. And even if I didn't particularly like this for a background, I could die cut something out of it and it would be really unique and different. So that is combining those two techniques. I'm going to move this. So I did this one earlier. And as you can see, each one is going to be unique and different. This is the one that I did a little bit earlier. This one has a little more of the yellow and a little less of the green, but I think every single time I like how it turns out. I'm using a cover die from Tailored Expressions that is, I think, called the Leafy, I'm not sure, Wreath Wreath. I have a link to it in the description, but it's a really pretty die that doesn't take away too much from the background that we've created. Get my pokey to lift these. Get them started. I'm using score tape in a little thicker size that I just got recently to hold this down. With all those wrinkles and all that wetness from before, better to use a good strong tape to attach these. And get it started here. I'm going to attach it onto the front of a white card base, and I am not being real concerned about lining it up because this is a little larger than what I need, and that makes it very easy to just trim it out off to the perfect size. If I had cut it exactly to 5.5 by 4 1/4, sometimes it's hard to line that up, so I decided just to do it this way. And then I also put some score tape, this time in a skinny size, on the cover die that I'm attaching. I cut that out of that pretty wood grain paper from Park Lane, which I find myself using a lot. It's good good quality cardstock, 110-pound weight. It's good for card bases, but also for techniques, as I've done. And line this up with a little bit of a border on all the edges. And then I'm using a small thanks. All my cards, by the way, were all thank you cards. Did you see that? I've found myself in need of thank you cards recently, so all the cards that I made with these techniques were thank you cards. And all of the die credits will be on my blog. Except for this one, because I don't know where it came from. It's just a nice small thanks. I think I actually got it as a thanks when I ordered something online. And I layered it on black with that wood grain paper, so it's a little bit easier to read on that background. I sure had fun playing with these older techniques and updating them with new ways to do them and new cover dies. Remember to leave your idea for a name for the mix of the two techniques in the comments, and you might win a prize in the last card I made. Thanks for watching, sharing, and subscribing, and thanks too for helping me share the joy of creativity.